What if the family that erased you from their life unknowingly invited you to the most dangerous day of their lives? I came to my sister's wedding expecting awkward smiles and silent judgment. But no one could have guessed this glamorous event would hide a deadly assassination plot. And even less expected, that I'd be the one to stop it. That night didn't just reveal hidden betrayal. It became the turning point where I finally reclaimed the respect, dignity, and recognition I had always deserved. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about how the truth rises when you least expect it. The moment I stepped into my Boston apartment, I knew something was off. The air was stale, heavy with silence, the kind that settled after too many days away. I kicked off my boots, still crusted with the fine red dust from a classified operation on the edge of a no-name desert. My fingers ached from days gripping cold steel, my body screamed for rest. But my mind was numb. I was home, at least technically. My home had never been this apartment with its sterile walls and overlooked city skyline. My home was meant to be people, family, the kind that didn't notice whether I lived or died. I dumped my duffel on the hardwood floor, flexing my shoulders as I reached for the tablet I rarely powered on. My official channels were encrypted, protected, but this was my last fragile connection to a civilian life I barely belonged to anymore. No one from my family ever texted, no calls, no check-ins, but sometimes the algorithms knew before I did. The notification was there, bright and bold, flashing like a slap to the face. Sabrina Maddox, my younger sister, my polar opposite. A tagged photo with her beaming in a white gown under strings of fairy lights. The caption gushed, "Said yes to forever," and the comments? God, the comments. They read like a script from a family I had never been part of. "You look like a princess. So happy for you both. Can't wait for the big day." My stomach twisted. I scrolled through photo after photo. Sabrina twirling in lace, my mother. Gloria laughing in coordinated pearls. My father, Raymond, raising a glass with practiced pride. I wasn't in any of them. There was no mention of me, no trace I even existed in the world they had built for themselves. That should have surprised me, but it didn't. Not anymore. I was trained to recognize patterns, to anticipate threats. And the pattern here was obvious. From the moment I could remember, I had been the piece that didn't fit. The Maddox family wanted glossy, photogenic perfection, graduates with corporate jobs, Sunday brunches, Instagram-worthy milestones. Sabrina was all of that and more. I was something else. I still remembered the day I graduated boot camp, standing proud in my pressed uniform, a medal pinned to my chest. There were no family photos that day, no proud mother fanning her eyes, no father shaking my hand. Instead, my mother posted pictures of Sabrina's high school art exhibit, calling her our shining star. My achievements were inconvenient, difficult to explain at social clubs, impossible to glamorize on Facebook feeds. I didn't fit their narrative, so they edited me out. I placed the tablet down, pressing my palms into the cold counter, letting the weight of it all wash over me. I wasn't surprised to be left out of Sabrina's engagement announcement, but finding out about my sister's wedding from a social media tag, a public event everyone else was excited about, felt like a gut punch I wasn't prepared for. My phone remained silent. No missed calls, no messages. My mother hadn't even sent a courtesy text. The absence of words screamed louder than any argument. They didn't forget me. They erased me. I stared at the invitation photos, again zooming into the background, watching my mother's polished smile, my father's practiced charm, Sabrina's effortless glow. They were preparing for the biggest day of her life, and I was never meant to know about it. My first instinct was to turn away, to delete the notification and let them bury me again like they always did. But something inside me shifted. Not bitterness. Bitterness I'd conquered years ago. No, it was something sharper, cleaner. Dignity. They thought they could cut me out of the frame. They thought they could silence everything I'd become, everything I'd survived. They forgot one thing I had survived worse. I had survived hell holes they couldn't spell, operations they'd never hear about, loss they'd never comprehend. And I didn't crawl my way through that fire to be forgotten like a discarded souvenir. I closed my fist. Slowly, pulse steadying. I would go to that wedding. Not for them. Not for Sabrina. Not for some delusion of reconciliation. I would go because I had earned my place in this world. Because I refused to be erased. Because I refused to let them rewrite me out of my own family. I would walk into that estate as the shadow they couldn't ignore. I would stand tall in full view as the woman they failed to break, the soldier they chose to forget. I would show up not for revenge, but for the one thing they could never take from me: my dignity. The Elms estate sat at the far end of a winding country road draped in autumn gold, its stone facade gleaming like a relic of old money elegance. I pulled into the gravel lot, fingers flexing around the steering wheel, breathing through the dull thrum building in my chest. I had been in ambush zones quieter than this. There was something uniquely suffocating about walking into a family celebration where you weren't wanted, into a world that had systematically cut you out like a surgical excision. I stepped through the grand archway, my boots echoing against polished marble floors, every inch of me alert and guarded. The first thing I noticed wasn't the decor, though it was predictably extravagant, but the absence of any welcome. No greetings, no surprised gasps, no calls of my name. It was as if I had walked into a stranger's wedding. At the reception desk, the young woman barely glanced up before tapping her iPad. Name: Claire Maddox. I replied, my tone neutral but clipped. Her fingers hesitated, brows pinching slightly before she forced a polite smile. Oh, your family. She scrolled again, her lips pressing into a thin line before nodding awkwardly. You'll be seated in the auxiliary section near the west patio. Auxiliary section? Not even the back row. Just the overflow, a convenient corner where the family could pretend I didn't exist. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and followed the usher's lead. The venue was all luxury. Massive chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, white linens ironed to perfection. I could hear laughter bubbling from the main ballroom where people I had bled for in uniform now mingled freely without a second thought about me. My chair was nestled by the exit door next to a drafty window and a distant cousin I hadn't seen since high school. She smiled in that forced, thin-lipped way people reserve for uncomfortable small talk. I offered a curt nod and sat down, adjusting the crisp lines of my slate-gray jacket, the only thing I owned close enough to civilian wedding appropriate. I didn't expect affection, but nothing prepared me for the pure coldness when Gloria drifted past, dressed in a soft lavender dress, her hair pinned perfectly into a French twist. She looked straight at me, blinked once, and moved on without a word, as if I were some last-minute acquaintance of the groom's side. My father Raymond didn't fare much better. He was laughing with a group of men near the bar when he noticed me. His smile twitched, faltered, and without breaking stride, he turned his back, swallowed up by the crowd. Then there was Sabrina. She entered like a goddess, ivory silk flowing around her like clouds, her grin radiant under the spotlight. She glided from group to group, pausing for hugs, smiling for photos. I waited for a glance, a flicker of recognition. There was nothing. Her gaze skimmed my section like it didn't register, like I was invisible, forgotten. I sat there, steady, composed, letting the old wound sting but not bleed. I'd come expecting nothing, but there was still a hollow space inside me. I hadn't anticipated the ache of being truly erased from your own family's narrative. When the first round of champagne arrived, I declined. Instead, I took a slow scan of the venue, my operative instincts kicking in, observing every detail with the precision of years in the field. That's when I saw the guest list displayed discreetly on a side tablet for seating confirmations. I stood, walked over, pretending to scan the names for curiosity's sake. The usual suspects were all there: local politicians, business owners, Sabrina's college friends, Gloria's social circle. Then a name stopped me cold: General Alan Prescott. My jaw tightened. I scrolled back, reread the name, then triple-checked it against the seating chart. Front row positioned near the Maddox family table. My heart knocked against my ribs for a different reason this time. General Prescott wasn't just any guest. He was my former commanding officer, a man I hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. He was respected, decorated, and politically dangerous to the type of people who thrived in manipulation. His presence wasn't coincidence. Not here, not today. I stepped away from the tablet and pressed my phone against my thigh, feeling the familiar buzz of encrypted comms activating. There was only one person I trusted to make sense of this Logan Whitaker. Logan answered after 2 rings, his voice low professional but laced with quiet curiosity. I didn't think I'd hear from you on a Saturday. You know Sabrina's wedding is today? I asked, my tone sharper than intended. A pause. Yeah, I didn't know you were invited. I wasn't. I crashed it, I said flatly before softening my voice. Logan, I need you to run a name check for me. Actually, check the whole guest list. Witch Estate, Elms Estate, Catskills private wedding. Sabrina Maddox and some guy named Richard whatever. Matt Halpern. Logan corrected instinctively. Of course he already knew. He always kept track of me in the periphery. Yeah, him. Focus on a specific guest. General Alan Prescott. That got his attention. His silence stretched just long enough for me to hear the scratch of his chair shifting. Prescott's there, front row. Interesting, Logan muttered, fingers flying over keys on his end. Give me an hour. If there's something off about this guest list, I'll find it. I swallowed down the lump in my throat, casting one last look at the sea of strangers who bore my last name but not my loyalty. Thanks, Logan. Something tells me this wedding isn't just about vows and flowers. I'm on it, he promised. I ended the call, my hands steady despite the quiet storm brewing in my chest. If my family thought they could cut me out of their picture, they clearly underestimated the fact I'd learned how to read between the lines. Logan's call came just after dusk. I was standing by the far terrace watching the sunset bleed across the vineyards, pretending I was just another guest blending into the scenery. My phone buzzed once the distinct vibration pattern only Logan used for encrypted comms. I pressed the receiver to my ear, angling my body away from the nearest group of gossiping relatives. Got your list. Logan's voice cut through the static. And you were right to be suspicious. My pulse quickened. Talk to me. General Alan Prescott isn't here just for wedding cake and happy family photos, Logan said. He's been running a quiet audit on former Black Ops missions, specifically Vanguard operations, the same ones Marcus Reed tampered with. I stiffened my gaze, sharpening across the crowd. Prescott's looking into Black Horizon. Not just Black Horizon, Logan replied. He's digging into the entire false chain of command Marcus constructed. Prescott's been in contact with certain oversight committees. Word is he's preparing to reopen classified files. My chest tightened. Prescott had been a ghost in my memory. A good man caught in a broken system. Years ago, when my name got buried under false accusations and doctored mission reports, he'd been the only senior officer who tried to fight back. But the machine crushed him too, pushing him into early retirement, sidelining him from meaningful command. And now he was back. Here, of all places. Logan, tell me there's more. There's always more, Logan said grimly. Prescott and Marcus have history, old messy and unresolved. Prescott formally challenged Marcus's budget allocations during his last commission, caught discrepancies in offshore funding and shell contracts tied to private military contractors. Marcus buried the audit, forced Prescott out before things got ugly. And now he's showing up at Sabrina's wedding, I whispered, gripping the terrace railing, right when Marcus is conveniently linked to the guest list through Matt Halpern's corporate investors. This isn't a coincidence. Logan's voice lowered. It gets worse. Word from my contacts inside Defense Oversight, Prescott intends to make a statement soon. About you. My heart kicked harder against my ribs. Say that again. Prescott is planning to name you publicly Claire, to clear your record and expose the manipulated after-action reports. He has enough leverage now that it won't be easy for the department to sweep it under the rug again. I took a step back, my fingers running along the railing, piecing the puzzle together in real time. Marcus wasn't just here to keep tabs on Prescott, Maom. He was here to silence him, and the timing wasn't just bad luck. It was engineered. A high-profile wedding filled with distractions, limited security, and a perfectly timed platform for a single decisive strike. My jaw clenched. If Prescott speaks, Marcus falls. If Prescott disappears, Marcus wins. Exactly. Logan confirmed. And you just came back from a high-risk deployment in a classified zone. Marcus already controls the narrative that you're unstable, compromised a relic from a failed operation. You don't have a solid command anymore, no direct chain of protection. If something goes sideways tonight, you'll be the easiest person to pin it on. I felt it like a punch to the gut. The playbook was almost too familiar. Discredit the inconvenient soldier, bury the whistleblower, rewrite history while no one noticed. Marcus was orchestrating the final chapter of a cover-up that spanned years, and I was the perfect scapegoat to tie the loose ends. Logan. Do you have eyes on Marcus negative? But I've got chatter from the kitchen staff. There's an unusual number of external contractors tonight. Event security isn't local, subcontracted from a firm Marcus's shell companies used before. And 2 waiters aren't showing up on standard payroll checks. I inhaled, slowly grounding myself. Which means Marcus brought his own muscle. 1 strike to eliminate Prescott, 1 media spin to paint me as the insider threat. That's what it looks like, Logan confirmed. And if they succeed, your name gets buried for good. I straightened my posture, a slow determination washing over me. They'd erased me from family dinners, from photo albums, from social events, but they wouldn't erase me from history. Not this time. Not when I had worked too hard to reclaim my place. Marcus wants to make me the villain of tonight's story, I said quietly. But I'm going to flip the narrative. I'll stop the hit, expose him, and make damn sure my family watches it unfold. Logan's tone shifted, steel threading through his words. Tell me what you need. I stepped back inside the estate, the chatter and music swelling around me, but my focus was razor sharp. I need confirmation on security patterns, identity checks on the catering team, and access points around the East Ballroom. We're going to find Marcus's triggerman before the shot's fired. And then Logan asked. Then I said, my voice calm but resolute. We take back everything they tried to steal from me. My reputation, my truth, my name. The line went quiet for a beat. Then Logan's response came crisp and clear. Copy that. You have backup now, Claire. Let's finish this. I smiled for the first time that evening, a cold, steady smile that reached nowhere near my eyes. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. The first red flag came when I stepped out into the hallway near the East Ballroom, pretending to check the seating arrangements. I didn't need to scan long. My instincts kicked in the second I caught the way one of the waiters adjusted his tray. Weight, perfectly balanced, posture too precise. He didn't carry himself like a seasonal catering hire. His steps were too controlled, his gaze too focused, like a man used to assessing threat perimeters rather than hors d'oeuvres. His frame was lean, but disciplined muscle memory etched into every movement. Then came the finer details. Subtle, but I'd been trained to notice them. The faint bulge of calluses at the base of his thumbs, the telltale grip of someone who spent years training with firearms. There was a slight crease near his collarbone where a concealed chest holster would sit under a jacket. And when he passed me, I caught it. The distinct chemical undertone of lubricating oil mingled beneath the vanilla-scented air fresheners. I didn't follow immediately. I circled back into a quieter corridor, pressed my phone to my ear, and tapped the side, twice initiating a secure connection. Logan answered before the second buzz. "Talk to me," he said. "I've got a ghost in the catering team," I murmured. White male, mid-30s, close-cut hair, rigid posture, and wearing a rental service badge. Movements scream muscle for hire, not wedding help. "What's his tag, Evan Cross?" I replied, having glimpsed the name pinned to his vest when he breezed past me. "Cross-check him now." Nam. I waited standing by the window, pretending to look out at the vineyards while tracking Evan's reflection as he moved through the hallway. Logan worked fast. Fingers clicking across his keyboard, cross-referencing databases. Nothing under the official Elms Estate catering roster, Logan confirmed. Not on local payroll, no freelance contracts, no digital footprint attached to this event. Whoever Evan Cross is, he was inserted off the books. I pressed my fingers against my temple, calculating fast. Marcus wasn't subtle. He wasn't meant to be. This wasn't about stealth. It was about plausible deniability. One quiet shot, one untraceable assassin, and a room full of distractions to cover it up. "I need full surveillance on him," I said. "I want his movement tracked from now until the end of the night." "Already done," Logan replied. "But you'll need eyes inside. I've got someone," I said. Without hesitation, I typed out a single coded message and sent it across an encrypted channel. Less than a minute later, a reply came through. 3 words. "I'm already here." Blake Donovan, my oldest field partner, had always been good at staying one step ahead. I pushed off the window frame moving through the service corridor until I spotted him tucked against the wall near the secondary kitchen entrance. Blake hadn't changed. Broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, blending in like a professional ghost dressed in an inconspicuous black suit with a neutral tie. Nobody gave him a second glance because he looked like he belonged. "Cross is our trigger man," I said under my breath, approaching without breaking stride. Blake's lips barely moved. "Confirmed." I clocked him lingering near the access door to the east balcony. No serving duties logged. Carrying something heavy in his right jacket pocket. "Target remains General Prescott," I stated. Blake gave a slight nod. "Too many variables to make a clean shot inside the ballroom. He's likely planning to intercept when the general steps out for the post-ceremony photo op." I calculated the odds quickly. "I'll bait Cross into making a move early," I said. "We catch him with the weapon before anyone gets hurt. We need the attempted hit as leverage, not a cleanup job after the fact." Blake's mouth curved in a grim smile. "Knew you wouldn't let this slide quietly." I didn't fight through 2 tours and a political cover-up just to watch Marcus Reed clean up his mess, I said, steel lining my voice. "Tonight we change the story." Blake's hand patted my shoulder, once firm and solid. "I'll trail him. You get the general out of the direct line of fire and prep the reveal. If Cross makes a move, I'll pin him down." My fingers curled into fists at my side. "And when we expose this, Marcus Reed doesn't just lose a pawn. He loses everything." I peeled away from the hallway, every sense on high alert, my steps measured and calm on the surface. But inside, every muscle coiled with purpose. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about rewriting my story. Right here, right now. And reminding them all exactly who they tried to erase. The timing was everything. I knew it the moment I studied the layout of the Elms Estate, mapping every hallway, every emergency exit, every vantage point, with the kind of focus only years of operational training could drill into a person. Logan's updates came in quick succession, Blake feeding me eyes-on reports from the floor, and it all pointed to one inevitable conclusion. Evan Cross would strike just minutes after General Prescott's scheduled speech, the precise moment I would be standing in the open, acknowledged for the first time in front of people who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. It wasn't just a hit. It was an execution designed to be a spectacle. Prescott's life snuffed out before the applause even died down, and me positioned perfectly in the room to take the fall. All Marcus needed was a trigger pull and a planted narrative, and my name would be wiped out for good. Not tonight. I adjusted my jacket palms steady as I walked through the secondary corridor, tracking Evan's movements through the radio feed in my ear. Blake was trailing him discreetly, staying just enough out of range to avoid spooking him but close enough to intercept if needed. My role was simple: cut the snake's head off before it had a chance to strike. I timed my interception near the East Wing hallway, the one that led to the secluded service balcony where Prescott would be ushered for post-ceremony photos. The narrowness of the corridor worked in my favor. Few escape routes, no audience to complicate matters, just me and Evan in a controlled environment. I caught him mid-step, his frame shifting with the kind of silent purpose I'd seen in Black Ops personnel, his hand adjusting something beneath his jacket. I stepped directly into his path, blocking his route with a casual stance, arms loose at my sides, but every nerve wound tight. "Evening cross," I said, keeping my voice light but sharp enough to cut through the pretense. "Funny how you're always one hallway behind the general." He barely blinked, but his left foot shifted back, weight distributing for movement. I didn't wait for him to finish the calculation. I pivoted my left forearm, slamming into his extended wrist as he went for the weapon concealed beneath his coat. The force knocked his balance off-center enough for me to drive my knee into his abdomen, forcing a grunt from his chest. He reacted fast, trained, efficient, but I was faster. His elbow cut toward my ribs, but I dropped my weight, deflecting the strike, catching his forearm and twisting it sharply behind his back. His body slammed into the wall, my forearm pinning his neck against the plaster, while my free hand expertly disarmed him, retrieving the sleek pistol fitted with a compact suppressor. His breath came in short bursts, muscles straining against my grip. I leaned in close, voice low and lethal. "Bad news for you, Cross. You're not the only one in this room who knows how to kill quietly." Blake appeared seconds later, flanking my right firearm drawn but lowered, signaling to the incoming venue security. "Clear to proceed," he said, eyes flicking to me. "Ready when you are." With precise efficiency, we secured Evan's hands behind his back with cable restraints Blake provided, frisked him for additional weapons, and retrieved the forged staff credentials he carried. Venue security rushed in moments later, their faces pale when they realized who was being detained. "Escort him through the main ballroom," I instructed, calmly adjusting my jacket. Everyone deserves to see exactly what almost happened. We didn't sneak Evan out the back. We walked him straight through the heart of the celebration. Conversations froze mid-sentence as we marched through the arched doors into the main ballroom. Music stuttered to a halt. Guests turned, gasps rippling like waves across the room. Faces I knew, and many I didn't, stared wide-eyed as Blake and I marched Evan Cross forward, his head lowered, his restraint bindings obvious against his dark jacket. General Prescott stood at the center dais, halfway through preparing for his address, his expression sharpening the second he spotted me. I walked directly to him, lifted the recovered weapon, holding it steady in one gloved hand. This man, I announced, clearly letting my voice fill the hall, was moments away from executing General Prescott. Armed, concealed, positioned to strike. Gasps turned into murmurs, some stepping back, others pressing forward to listen. My mother's mouth parted in horror, my father's complexion draining to gray. Sabrina's lips trembled as she clutched the arm of her husband. General Prescott stepped forward, towering in both stature and command presence. His eyes didn't flicker once. He took the pistol from me, inspecting it briefly before turning to the crowd. This woman, Major Claire Maddox, just saved my life, he declared, voice cutting through the stunned silence. And not for the first time. He turned back to me, eyes steady, his voice lowering, but every word still audible. "I wouldn't have survived that desert without you. I wouldn't have made it home then, and I wouldn't have walked away from tonight either." See, my throat tightened, but I stood straighter, my grip steady, chest rising with something deeper than pride. Vindication. Prescott faced the crowd again. "Some of you erased her from your lives. Some of you acted like she didn't exist. Let tonight serve as your reminder. Major Maddox's service saved lives then, and she just saved all of yours again." The room descended into a mixture of shocked silence and quiet, shifting guests, exchanging glances they could no longer avoid. I stood there, unflinching, unashamed, fully present in the skin they had spent years pretending didn't matter. They wanted me invisible. But now they had no choice but to see me. I stood beneath the weight of 100 scrutinizing eyes, but my shoulders had never been straighter. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. For years they had told me to stay silent, to accept the narrative others crafted for me. Tonight, the silence would finally be broken. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't glance at Sabrina. I only met the gaze of General Prescott standing tall beside me, giving the faintest nod of encouragement. His presence was my shield, but tonight I would be my own sword. With a tap on my tablet, the main screen shifted from the decorative wedding slideshow to encrypted data feeds pulled directly from internal defense archives. Evidence collected quietly by Logan, verified by Blake, and corroborated by multiple off-the-record testimonies. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice projecting across the ballroom tonight, "you gathered to celebrate a union. But what you didn't know is that some of you were also brought here to witness the truth. Not about me, but about the man responsible for countless buried lies and destroyed lives." The murmurs began uneasy shifting in seats. From the corner of my vision, I saw Marcus Reed's expression harden, his smile twitching at the edges. He adjusted his cufflinks mask still in place, but I recognized the small tremor of a man realizing control was slipping from his grip. I pointed toward the screen. These files were extracted from sealed mission logs and internal communications. Logs manipulated, redacted, and forged by Marcus Reed. Prescott stepped forward, his voice filling the hall with the same authority that once commanded battlefields. I personally witnessed the systematic doctoring of field reports under Marcus Reed's directive, reports designed to scapegoat my best field officers, to conceal operational failures, and to protect his own interests. Gasps spread through the crowd. A few of the high-ranking guests leaned forward, whispering rapidly among themselves. Others simply stared, stunned. Blake Donovan joined us at the front, his tone sharp, his presence intimidating in its simplicity. He raised his hand, pressing play on a secured audio file. The ballroom filled with the crackling sound of old communication logs. "Let the fallout land on Maddox Marcus's recorded voice," echoed through the speakers. "She took the lead. She takes the blame." Another log followed this time, a string of text messages projected onto the screen. "Marcus Reed confirmed. Reassigning Prescott. That old bastard's getting too nosy." Unknown. Contact Maddox is isolated. Push the rogue narrative. Marcus Reed. Good. She disappears. The trail goes cold. I didn't need to say anything. The data spoke louder than any accusation ever could. My father's knuckles whitened around his wine glass. My mother's hand trembled at her chest, clutching non-existent pearls. Sabrina's face drained of color, her lips parting in a mute whisper. They weren't just watching me reclaim my identity. They were witnessing the collapse of everything they thought they understood about me. And about Marcus. I turned back to the crowd, keeping my voice level. "You were all so eager to erase me, to believe the headlines crafted by political convenience. Tonight you'll witness who truly orchestrated the betrayal." Prescott cleared his throat, his jaw firm. "Marcus Reed is guilty of manipulating operational data, endangering civilian lives, orchestrating fraudulent narratives, and deliberately destroying the careers of officers who stood in his way." Marcus stepped forward, trying to regain ground. "This is out of context," he began, but his voice wavered, lacking its usual dominance. "These files are part of outdated operations. Incorrect." Blake cut him off, raising a fresh set of documents. "These are time-stamped within the last 6 months. This includes recent attempts to silence Prescott and frame Claire Maddox as a compromised agent." The weight of the moment was suffocating, but I welcomed it. Every whispered insult, every patronizing dismissal, every cold stare from my own family, all of it condensed into this single moment where the truth stood undeniable. "You didn't just try to erase me," I said softly but firmly, locking eyes with Marcus. "You tried to erase the truth. You used your power to bury honorable soldiers, to manipulate history, and to cover your own corruption." The room crackled with tension. For the first time, Marcus Reed's confidence cracked visibly. His fingers twitched, his posture faltered. Prescott delivered the final blow. "Marcus Reed will answer before a federal tribunal. His protected status is revoked as of this moment." Behind me, I heard the distant shuffle of security agents positioning themselves ready to detain a man who had thought himself untouchable for far too long. I looked at my family, meeting their eyes without flinching. They had banished me from this world, from their lives. But now they would watch me walk back into the light, not as the forgotten soldier, but as the woman who brought the truth back to life. And as I stood there, unwavering, I knew I had just rewritten the ending they tried to script for me. Marcus didn't go down without a fight. I knew he wouldn't. The man was too practiced at survival, too arrogant to believe anyone could outmaneuver him, especially someone like me. Someone his network had written off years ago as expendable, broken, irrelevant. His jaw was tight as he stepped forward, trying to reclaim the room's attention, trying to spin the same tired narrative he'd always used. "This is political theater," he barked, raising his voice enough to cut through the silence that had swallowed the ballroom. "These files were cherry-picked, spliced together to manipulate perception. You're watching a soldier with a vendetta twist operational data to avoid accountability for her own failures." I stood tall, unflinching. His words didn't sting like they once had. Not after everything I'd survived. Not after the countless nights I spent knowing my name was buried while his star kept rising. I was trained to spot misdirection. "Marcus," I said evenly, my voice steady as steel, "and I see it in you clearer than ever." The tension rippled across the room. Guests shifted in their seats, torn between the shock of the revelations and the polished performance Marcus tried to summon back. I could see my mother's shoulders curl inward, my father's jawline grinding under the weight of realization. Marcus stepped closer to the center of the ballroom, trying to reclaim his power through sheer presence. "You think this handful of files proves anything? You think this one general's word can overwrite classified directives? I served this country with distinction. I protected national interests while you," he jabbed a finger toward me, "ran rogue, destabilizing sanctioned operations." The lie would have landed harder if Logan hadn't chosen that exact moment to cut him off. From the back of the room, Logan's voice rang out cool and crisp, amplified by the house speakers he'd quietly hacked through the AV system. "You didn't just destabilize operations," Marcus Logan said. "You sold them." Every head turned. Marcus froze. Logan walked forward through the sea of stunned faces, tablet in hand, projections shifting behind him. "What the general revealed tonight is just the beginning. Let's talk about your private accounts. 6 offshore shelters hidden behind shell corporations. Let's talk about your connections to the Rothman Syndicate, a blacklisted paramilitary trafficking network flagged in 8 countries. I saw the blood drain from Marcus's face. These transactions, Logan continued pulling up spreadsheets filled with wire transfers and cryptocurrency ledgers, tie you directly to laundering millions through illegal arms deals. Money exchanged not just to cover up battlefield failures, but to actively destabilize regions for personal gain. Marcus lunged his hand, shooting out in a desperate attempt to knock the tablet from Logan's grip, but he never made it. Blake stepped in, intercepting him effortlessly, one arm locking around Marcus's torso, forcing him back. "Sit down, Marcus," Blake said, voice low and dangerous. "You're done." The room was already moving. 2 plainclothes agents from the Defense Intelligence Command were approaching from the side, joined by a pair of uniformed officers from the local enforcement detail. The commanding officer read from a warrant as they advanced. "Marcus Reed, by order of the Defense Intelligence Tribunal and Federal Investigation Protocols, you are hereby detained on suspicion of falsifying military records, conspiracy to commit fraud against the federal government, aiding and abetting organized crime, and multiple counts of treason against the United States." Marcus thrashed once, twice a caged animal, realizing his trap had finally closed around him. But the fight bled out of his limbs as the agents closed in, locking heavy cuffs around his wrists, disarming the last illusion of power he thought he held. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I watched him be led away, steady and quiet, feeling a deeper satisfaction than any outward display could offer. I wasn't the exiled soldier anymore. I wasn't the invisible daughter they could edit out of family photographs. I was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by witnesses who could no longer deny the truth. My name wasn't a liability now. It was evidence. I had become the living proof of the corruption they'd spent years trying to hide. As Marcus was pulled through the ballroom doors, General Prescott stepped beside me, his voice low and certain. "From forgotten to irreplaceable, Maddox," he said. "You just shifted the balance of this war." And for the first time in years I felt it. Not vengeance, not rage, but power. Real, undeniable power. Tonight I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the witness, the survivor, the reckoning. The silence after Marcus was dragged away felt heavier than any firefight I'd survived. But this wasn't the sound of gunfire ceasing. It was the sound of illusions crumbling. The Maddox family image, perfect, untouchable, carefully curated for every holiday card and social media post, lay shattered in full view of anyone who mattered. And for once, I wasn't the one left in the wreckage. I stood alone by the main aisle, letting the weight of it settle. General Prescott had already moved aside, giving me space, knowing some battles had to be fought without backup. And sure enough, the first approach came from Gloria Maddox. She walked toward me like a woman forcing herself through mud, her steps halting, shoulders hunched in a way I had never seen before. Her manicured hands trembled slightly, and I could tell the cracks in her carefully preserved facade were starting to show. For years, she had been the orchestrator of spotless family appearances. Tonight she couldn't hide behind filters or controlled captions. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, almost fragile. "Claire, I didn't know. I didn't blink. You didn't want to know." Her lips pressed into a thin line, blinking back the shock of being spoken to so plainly. I felt no triumph in it, no smugness, just quiet, hard truth. My father stood behind her for once, without the straightened spine and puffed chest. His eyes avoided mine, shifting to the floor, fingers nervously adjusting the cuff of his blazer like a man trying to busy himself to escape shame. He didn't offer excuses, and in some way that was the most honest thing Raymond Maddox had ever done. I kept my tone level. "I'm not asking you to rewrite the last decade. I'm not asking for applause or fake apologies. I don't need your pride. I just need you to stop pretending I was never part of this family." Gloria's mouth opened, but the words died in her throat. She looked older than I remembered, as though years of denial had been peeled away in one catastrophic evening. Then Sabrina appeared, hovering hesitantly beside them. Her gown, once pristine and shining, looked dull beneath the ballroom's lights. Her cheeks were pale, lips pressed tight as she searched for the right words. I expected resentment. I expected another jab about me ruining her big day. Instead, she looked at me with something I had never seen in her expression. Embarrassment, maybe guilt. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. I had no idea, Marcus. I just wanted sponsorships. The connections." I arched a brow. "You let men like Marcus sit at your table. You let them buy their way into your celebrations. And you didn't ask questions." Her chin dipped, fingers clutching her bouquet like it could hide the reality of what we both knew. "I didn't know they were the reason you... I thought you just... drifted away." "No," I said quietly. "I was pushed out. I was buried because it made things easier for everyone here." The silence stretched long between us, awkward and heavy, but I didn't step in to ease it. They needed to sit in it for once. General Prescott's voice broke through the tension, cutting through like a blade, calm, but commanding. "Major Maddox," he said, using my title firmly, drawing the attention of anyone nearby. "There will be a full federal review of your case. I will personally ensure your service record is restored, your honors reinstated, and your name cleared across all military channels." I turned to him, offering a firm nod of acknowledgement, my chest tightening, not with gratitude, but with something steadier: vindication. Gloria's hands twisted together, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were always stronger than us." I shrugged. "Not stronger, just not built to pretend." My father finally forced himself to meet my eyes, guilt flickering behind his polished facade. I could see it. Too little, too late. But for once, they weren't looking through me. They were seeing me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if they approved. I didn't need their approval. I had stood in the darkest corners of the world and survived. I had pulled men from wreckage and dragged civilians through gunfire. I had exposed corruption at the cost of my own peace. And here I stood, whole, unbroken, and finally seen. I inhaled deeply, letting the tension drain from my shoulders as I turned toward the exit. I wasn't staying for champagne toasts or forced family pictures. Let them piece together what was left of their image. I wasn't part of that fabrication anymore. But as I walked away, I heard it. Gloria's quiet voice, trembling, defeated. "We should have never let her go." "No," I thought, lips curving into a faint, grim smile. "You never really had me, but you'll never forget me again." The first time I stood in front of a camera after years of silence, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice finally speaking my name aloud. The backdrop was a plain government press hall, the insignia of the Defense Department behind me, flanked by an American flag and the official seal of the armed forces. Journalists sat in straight rows, cameras, blinking microphones angled forward like an army of silent witnesses. And I, Claire Maddox, Major of the United States Army, stood tall, no longer a whisper hidden behind redacted lines. It had taken weeks after the wedding to complete the investigation, weeks of declassified files pouring into oversight committees, weeks of relentless media coverage digging up everything that had been buried under Marcus Reed's lies. Every time a new report aired, every time my name crossed a news ticker, the world learned a little more about what had really happened in those distant war zones, about the missions that had gone wrong not because of me, but because of people who gambled with soldiers' lives for personal gain. My reinstatement came swiftly once the walls collapsed. General Prescott personally oversaw the tribunal hearing. I sat before them, not as the accused, but as the wronged officer whose loyalty had been twisted and discarded. They restored my rank without hesitation, pinned the silver oak leaves of Major back onto my uniform, and reissued my commendations along with the formal apology that echoed through every major media outlet. Prescott didn't stop there. He organized a ceremony, not tucked away in some military office, but on the grounds of Fort Valor, the same place I had first been commissioned. A full military band played soldiers lined in formation, a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Some I had bled with, some who had simply heard my story and shown up to stand witness. As I stood at the center dais uniform, crisp metals shining under the afternoon sun, I felt something I hadn't in years: belonging. My boots didn't feel heavy anymore. My shoulders no longer sagged under the weight of false accusations. I was no longer the outcast, the forgotten. I was back where I was always meant to be, among the ranks of those who understood sacrifice, loyalty, and the quiet strength of never giving up even when the world decided you were expendable. General Prescott's words cut clear through the crowd, echoing into the open air. Major Claire Maddox exemplifies the highest standard of courage and integrity. Her story is not just a correction of injustice, but a reminder that no matter how many times the truth is buried, it will rise. And when it does, it will stand taller than every lie stacked against it. Applause thundered through the assembly. The soldiers around me stood at attention, saluting not just me, but the endurance it had taken to get here. Cameras clicked rapidly, broadcasting the moment to every screen in the country. I could already imagine the headlines. Major Maddox, vindicated from betrayal to honor. A soldier's redemption. It wasn't about glory. It never had been. It was about reclaiming the part of myself that had been stolen. About standing in the light after years in the shadows. About proving to myself more than anyone that I wasn't the discarded daughter, the forgotten soldier, or the fabricated failure. I was Claire Maddox. Decorated, undefeated, and finally acknowledged. As the national anthem played, I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the sound wash over me. I thought about the years lost, the scars earned, the friendships buried, and the battles survived. And when I opened my eyes again, I stood taller. This was my story now. Written not in whispers or lies, but in ink that would never fade again. For the first time in years, I stood outside the Maddox family home, staring up at the house I once called mine. The porch light flickered softly, autumn leaves gathering around the steps where I used to sit polishing my boots, while Sabrina posted selfies before high school dances. The house hadn't changed. Same manicured lawn, same pretentious wreath hanging on the door, same air of manufactured perfection. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't here to slip back into forgotten corners or mend broken ties. I was here because I chose to be on my own terms. The door opened before I could knock. Gloria stood there, arms crossed, her expression tugging between discomfort and something I couldn't quite name. She looked smaller now, without the armor of judgment and curated smiles. She cleared her throat, stepping aside. "Dinner's ready," she said, softer than I'd ever heard. I stepped inside, not out of obligation, but because it no longer held power over me. The walls were decorated with family portraits, but this time I noticed a new addition, one of me in uniform positioned carefully among the others. Maybe guilt had prompted it, or maybe reality had finally forced them to see me for who I was. Either way, I wasn't here to analyze motives. Raymond waited at the dining table, shifting awkwardly as he stood. His hand hovered in the air before extending toward me in a stiff, uncertain gesture. "Claire," he started, voice scratchy, eyes avoiding mine. I got it wrong. All of it. I didn't let him squirm. I grasped his hand firmly, letting the silence linger just enough to make him sit with his words. "You did," I agreed simply before releasing his grip. Sabrina was already seated, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve, her wedding ring glinting under the light. She didn't speak for a long time, just watched me with an expression that didn't hold jealousy or resentment. Just quiet curiosity, like she was seeing me for the first time. When our eyes met, she gave a tiny nod. Not grandiose, not performative. Just acknowledgement. The dinner was clunky conversation, awkward, filled with hesitant attempts at normalcy. Gloria talked about trivial things. Raymond offered pieces of small talk like olive branches, and Sabrina listened more than she spoke. I didn't offer them comfort. I didn't pretend everything could be fixed over one meal. But I sat through it steady, knowing this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about reclaiming my space. Afterwards, I stepped out onto the porch alone, letting the crisp evening air bite at my skin. The sky stretched wide above, quiet and endless, and for the first time I didn't feel like I had to run from this place. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. Whether they understood it or not, I had already won. A week later, I found myself standing in front of the National Military Honor Wall. The brass plates shimmered beneath the overhead lights, rows upon rows of names carved into permanence. I walked until I reached the newest section, fingers brushing over fresh engravings, until I found mine. Major Claire Maddox. Beneath my name was a single line, chosen by the tribunal, approved by General Prescott, but carrying more weight than any apology my family could offer. Some truths are never buried. I stood there, breathing in the stillness, letting it settle in my chest. This wasn't just my victory. It was every forgotten soldier's quiet triumph, every erased name reclaimed. I was here because I fought back when they told me to disappear, because I stood tall when they wanted me silent. A familiar hand slipped into mine. Logan stood beside me, his usual quiet smirk curving his lips. "Looks good on you," he said, motioning toward the wall. "It's not about looks," I replied, but my mouth tilted upward anyway. It's about finally taking back my own story. He gave a slight squeeze to my hand. And now, I said simply, I live. For me. No more chasing approval, no more carrying anyone else's shame. I'll serve where I'm needed, but I'll build my life the way I choose. He smiled wider. About time. As we walked away from the wall, my steps felt lighter than they had in years. The scars were still there, but they were mine. My history was mine. My future. Undeniably mine. I didn't walk back into anyone's shadow that day. I walked forward unburdened and finally free. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or erased by the very people who should have stood by your side, then you understand Claire's story runs deeper than revenge. It's about reclaiming your worth when others tried to bury it. Have you ever been made to feel invisible, only to rise stronger than ever? Tell us in the comments. Your voice deserves to be heard too. If Claire's journey resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell. Every week we share powerful stories of resilience, justice, and quiet revenge. You won't want to miss what's coming next.